We all love a good villain. Honestly, it's one of the funnest parts of reading a story, just having an opposing force that is so incredibly fun to engage with. Are they super complex and really methodical and emotional, or are they just aura farming and evil for the sake of it? It doesn't even matter what type of villain you're doing. If they're just handled with that respect of being an opposing force, 9 times out of 10, you could have something special. If you want to take that further and make them some of the most memorable in the story or even in the industry, you have to push that pretty far. I'm sure you can rattle off a ton of impeccable villains, some that have been around for 5, 10, 15, 20 plus odd years. However, can you rattle off new villains, new antagonists, new opposing forces? That is a little bit more difficult. It takes time to build that opposing force. It takes time to make them menacing, to make them a villain, to make them a threat, but they gotta start somewhere, right? I want to show you some of my favorite villains and antagonists that are very, very new and have a ton of potential. Kagurabachi is an impressive story. I love it. It also has an impressive amount of antagonists. For a story that has less than 100 chapters, having about 4 primary antagonists that are all equally fantastic is ridiculous. And yet each one of them are so significant, so powerful, so entertaining to engage with. It's ridiculous that Hogozono is able to not only continuously one-up himself every iteration of character, but also the value of their differences between them. For example, at the beginning of Kagurabachi, there is a character known as Sojo, and he's relatively straightforward, but his introduction being the first opposing force to the main cast of characters is really explosive. He steals a ton of spotlight, and for all of the best reasons. Sojo put Kagurabachi on the map, no doubt about it. I'd go even as far as to say that without Sojo, potentially the other villains that have come after it would not be able to follow successfully within that blueprint. Sojo is the blueprint. He is the groundwork. He is the foundation for Kagurabachi's success. Hogozono was not only able to capitalize on that very early on, but he's also been able to evolve it. Since then, we've had Kyura, another character that is impeccable, and also Hirohiko, someone that's going to be a long-lasting villain or antagonist. There's one character that has had the most attention that stands above them all. Samura. I think for a lot of people, Samura is going to be a generational character. I think he is someone that you remember indefinitely. He is a complicated person, a complicated force, someone that isn't inherently evil, someone that has a very warped perception, but a ton of horrifying experience, someone that's scary on the battlefield and off the battlefield. Really just his influence over the entire story, over all of these characters is so monumental. It's like a wave that you just get swept up within, and when you kind of explore his mind more, when you find out his emotions, when you see the bigger picture, the reality of it, and just how Hogozono delivers that message thematically and symbolically, it's so goddamn beautiful. Like, it's such a compelling experience to read, not only every single week, but just him as an isolated character. You just want to unravel him more and understand him more, and that makes him difficult to digest. Out of all of the characters that Kagurabachi has, Samura is easily one of my favorites. I love him through and through, and with recent story developments, it's still changing. It's still unpredictable, and you don't know where his outcome is going to land. If you're not reading this story or know nothing about these characters, please do yourself a favor and read Kagurabachi. If it's not for any of them, do it for Samura. I promise you, you will not be disappointed. Chojin X is one of my favorite stories in recent years, not only because I am arguably the biggest glazer of Sue Ishida, the author of Tokyo Ghoul, unapologetically, by the way, but I just love how he writes his characters. There's something so human and frigid, just meticulous about them that feels so well crafted with respect and care and such attention to detail. It sounds silly to say, but they feel like complicated living and breathing human beings that don't feel like they're artificially crafted for a universe or a story. That might sound over dramatic, but I wholeheartedly feel that when reading his stories and his world and his characters, because they're just emotionally fulfilling to engage with. While it's on the older side of quote unquote new generation, going on 4+ years now, the quality that has gone into his villains, specifically two, Batista and Zora, is night and day. Like, these two are some of his best characters that he has written in his entire career, but they're not explosive. They're not relatively in your face. They're very sneaky and snarky and filled to the brim with beautiful, beautiful layers of exploration. So much so that me only talking about a couple of layers doesn't really do him justice. Batista is complicated and gross and very emotionally tormented. He has a very dark and rich history that's so lovely to engage with, but also traumatizing. It is horrible to see what he has gone through or what he has been through, but it's also equally horrible to see what he's doing and what he's becoming. It's unforgiving and relentless, and Ishida continues to double down on that nature very often. He wants you to be conflicted in supporting a character like this, one that is challenging evolution and human nature and the Trojan abilities as a whole. He's a really strong pillar in this story, one that is often seen. He brings the new, the variety, the refreshing, and it's something you can't get tired of. With the current events of this story, he is going through arguably the most creative, overwhelming, over-the-top process of not only his character, but Ishida's writing career. It is out there, that's for sure. And in my opinion, it's working so beautifully to lap everything over each other in this oddly cohesive, uncontrollable mess. I have not been as excited for a character or for a story than I have been with Batista and Trojan X. But that does not mean we can forget about Zora. She has carried this story since the beginning. The big threat, the prophecy that she has seen, the world coming to an end, a being spawned either to destroy the world or to save it. What are you meant to believe? So many of the good going up against her, not believing whatever she's putting on the table. She is so incredibly sad. Every time I get to see her, I just can't help but feel bad. Like, when you figure out her story, when you figure out what happened to her and why she is the way she is now, and pretty much how much influence that she has had throughout this entire story, what she has shaped on a global scale, it's really sad to see it all kind of come crumbling down like this god that is losing traction or steam or reality, even just slowly withering away with time, almost like a world that's replacing her or doesn't need her anymore. While she is technically the villain of the story, it's definitely a thing based purely through perspective. You don't have the full picture for her character, you don't have the full picture for what this story is about. All you know is that there is a vision of an oncoming calamity and people disagree with that vision. She is at the center of that vision, someone that is very scared of the future and trying to pass on this incredibly insane amount of power that she kind of accidentally awakened within the midst of war herself so many generations ago. Originally, she was viewed as a hero, and now she's viewed as this abomination monster trying to manipulate and destroy everything. But it's so far from the truth, and it's beautiful to engage with. I love it every single time, and I'm a bit scared to see where she goes and how she ends, but I have faith in Ishida to wrap everything together nicely. Mad is a really fun story to read. I love aliens. I love apocalyptic worlds. I love uninhabitable worlds. I like when humans have to try and evolve themselves to compete with a much more dangerous species like an alien. I also like hybridization, when those humans have to take some pretty drastic measures to evolve, like turning into an alien themselves in some way through experimentation or by force, whatever it may be. Mad feels like a mixture of a lot of stories, but really good stories. It stands on its own, but it has similarities that you'll feel. Stuff from Chainsaw Man, a little bit from Kaizen, but then it has big Attack on Titan vibes, and I cannot recommend it enough, especially because one of its leading villains of the story is really sinister, like purely playful sinister without even recognizing it. The context I have to give you is that this world is pretty much dog water. It is overran by aliens, and the only way that humans can survive is by having people called adapters, which are half human, half alien. It's a experimentation process. The villain of this story, his name is Leon, is unapologetically forcing humans to become adapters or hybrids. Now in his mind, this is all in the benefit of the human race, to save the human race, to evolve the human race, to fight back and reclaim the world. Humans have to evolve and they have to go through this experimentation. Unfortunately, the success rate is really, really low. Out of all the people he's experimented on, hundreds upon hundreds, there's only about 8 adapters, including himself. So you already get the idea of how disgusting and deathly this process is. Not many people live. If you do live, you kind of go out of control, you can become an adapter, you could try and fight everybody, like you just don't know what's going to happen. And Leon is meant to kind of help raise those adapters or hybrids to work together, to have like a SEAL Team 6 of hybrids, humans that can traverse up onto the surface and fight aliens in an alien form. Pretty simple, pretty straightforward. What I like about Leon is that he's incredibly unapologetic. He does not know what he is doing is wrong, and that he's definitely a meathead army vet. Even through all of the experimentation and the death and the destruction of certain compounds and narrative beats, he still thinks that he is right. He still thinks that what he is doing is okay. And while we adventure away from him and he's kind of isolated to himself, you kind of peel back a lot of the sadness to him just a bit. He holds grudges, but not in like a sinister revenge way, but more of like a I need to do this, beneficial humanity, blah blah blah. It comes off very warped and manipulative, but it's just genuine, like coded in his being that way. It is eerie, impeccable, and when you're reading the story and getting these reveals, he is such a blast to read. The Bugle Call is fantastic. If you haven't read this story, I recommend you do. But I do want to talk about kind of an antagonist in here called the Garland, mostly because I really appreciate the early game of the Garland and how they're represented. So the Garland, who does have a name and you do eventually see and get more information for, has a really strong presence. For a story that kind of operates in the medieval, but certain people have like superpowers, these are like your big generals or your big hitters. So you have your regular army, but your superpowered people are the ones that are getting stuff done on a medieval front. It's kind of cool. The Garland is introduced very early as like this big threat. If they want to do anything, they have to either avoid the Garland completely or take them out. The problem is that the Garland is really strong, like stupidly, as a superpowered person. When you start hearing the name more often, you start to question why they're powerful, right? That's like a natural instinct. You start to compare the name, the Garland, to some of the main cast of characters and their abilities, and you're like, okay, they can't be that much stronger, right? Like clearly they're a threat, but couldn't be anything that maybe 4 other superpowered people couldn't handle, right? Wrong, because it doesn't take long for the story to show you just what the Garland is about, and they are kind of global in comparison. See, there's a moment in the story where 2 armies are kind of about to fight, and it's a big deal because it's the first time the main cast of characters and their powers can kind of operate with each other as like a group fight. It's a really good development moment. What interrupts this fight is a massive meteor come flying out of the sky and just obliterates half of this mountain, just erases it from the world. That is the Garland. So the Garland has this ability to call upon meteors from space and aim them down perfectly with very, very accurate precision to enemies. When this happens, your whole perspective of the Garland changes, because like what has been amped up just by word, you now have a visual identification for it, and it is horrifying. Towns, nations, hundreds, thousands, tens of thousands of people can get wiped off the map. Half the earth could get blown apart if the Garland wanted to within a blink of an eye. When it comes to more development for the Garland and who they are and what they actually represent, yada yada, I will let you figure that out on your own. Just know that early on, I love their impact. I love what they bring to the story, just like this menacing, overwhelming power that no one can deal with. And it's super, super cool to see that title transform into something else. I like the development there. I like the curiosity that sparks from it, and there's more to the story of the Garland than just being this monstrosity of a being that can call down meteors and that the main cast of characters have to try and kill. If you haven't read The Bugle Call or Chojin X or Kagurabachi or Mad, and you're interested in any of these stories or any of these villains, antagonists, these characters, please do give them a chance. I promise you will love them. Take my word for it.